the way the American landscape and the fabric of American society was based on free labor, and why it is now that everyone feels the need to unionize and to have better wages.
It is not on us to finish everything. We are just part of it. Maybe what we need to do is to just join the line where we are. It is not, like you were saying before, there are some people who believe that this world belongs to them. Well, that is from a limited perspective, a limited point of view. The world is supposed to be for all of us. Every one of us is supposed to be part of it. And like you said, life in Africa, in African philosophy, you are not considered a man just because you are smart or you are able to think. I think, therefore I am, is too poor in Africa to be used as a description of who a man is.
When people can't talk to one another, you see people have road rage in cars. They're upset because the traffic's not going fast enough, or somebody cut them off, and all of a sudden they've lost their minds. What kind of a society are we living in where people behave in this way? My birth name is Deirdre Lovell. My given name by the Ghanaian people is Ama, and by the Egyptian Neteru Medu Neter, I am called Seshat Ma'at Keru, and then I'm affectionately known in my circle of mentees and dear friends as Mama D. Oh, and family members too. So we have lots of identities, which I embrace fully, and really am so feeling very well adapted to moving through all of these identities in a way that makes me and everyone around me feel safe and comfortable. So.
That's very interesting, Lovell. I can feel that this is going to be an interesting conversation. Well, how we do is that first we learn about you, because this is essentially about storytelling. Obehi Podcast is about storytelling. We talk about the individual we have in front of us. We always see it as an opportunity to learn from you, to learn from where you are coming from, what is your background, and what do you do, but why do you do what you do also. So by the time we put this package together, at least the people that are listening to you, they can sort of know you better. And why we do that is so that we can keep our memory. All these are important for us. So tell me, you are an adolescent growing up in the United States. What do you remember? What do you see around you?
Let me tell you, I am considered a baby boomer. And what that means is I was born between the Korean War and the Vietnamese War. And my parents, my mother is 8 generations African American. Our ancestors in the United States are from the Fulani people in the area at this time known as Cameroon. My father's family are from Barbados, and I believe that their ancestry is also Cameroonian, from the Cameroonian area, or the territory now known as the Camerons. I'm not sure that they are Fulani because in testing DNA, African ancestry DNA, we women are unable to learn their matriarchal lineage. As a female, I can only trace my matriarchal lineage. So my father was from Barbados, and he was an immigrant to the United States post World War II. My mother was a Rosie Rivet, and she was a chemical specialist who put detonators in bombs during World War II as a factory worker working for the Navy Department. She was born in Newport News, Virginia, and she and her three sisters and parents were part of the great migration out of the South to the North. My mother's family grew from 3 to 9, and they lived in a remote coal mining village in Western Pennsylvania. My mother went to Washington, D.C. to work for the Navy Department, explained, putting detonators in bombs during World War II. She was fresh out of high school and told me a story about Mary McLeod Bethune coming out to those very rural areas in the country where Black people were in community to encourage African Americans to join the war effort. And that was one of the reasons also to escape poverty, because these people were very, very poor in these areas. They were coal miners and farmers. But during the Depression, which was a very difficult time, particularly for Black people in this country. But anyway, off she goes to Washington, D.C., and then she ends up coming to New York after the war is over. She went to beauty school and became a hairdresser. Now, I don't know if anybody really understands all of this, but the chemicals that were used during the war were repurposed to be used in industry and domestically. So a lot of the chemicals that were used during wartime for warfare turned into household products, beauty products, cosmetics, these kinds of things. So this is the transition, and historically looking at the way one thing affects another and the way our lives are governed by all of our experiences, and how our experiences color the lives of others. My parents met in New York, and they married, and 5 years later, I was born. Now, my mother's family were quite happy for her because she was about to be considered an old maid. During those years, women who didn't marry until their 30s were kind of suspect, and having children after 30 was almost unheard of in those days, unless you already had 5 or 6 kids. So I was a treasured child, needless to say. My parents were bright, intelligent. My mother was a business owner. My father was a diesel engine technician. He built diesel engines. So he came from the West Indies with a skill set that was very desirable. And they were able, as a mature couple, to make a plan for their future. And I became part of that future. I was the only child of my parents together, but my father did have a family before he met my mother, because he was also 12 years her senior. So my parents were old by those standards, the standards of the day. And I was a treasured child, an absolute treasured child. And my memories are of great family gatherings. Our families in those days really relied heavily upon one another, particularly the Caribbean side of my family because of immigration, of course. So people tended to stick together. They tended to be in unison with one another because their survival depended on it. And the migratory story of African Americans out of the South was really escaping physical harm, terror, domestic terrorism, um, the theft of property, uh, the absolute horrors of violence, and a lot of people who made that journey out of the Deep South had such terrible memories of their birthplace, which would have been anywhere, as we call it, south of the Mason-Dixon line, which means our southern states or the Confederate States. And they never wanted to go back. And many of the stories or the heritage of African Americans is lost because of the horrors that so many families experienced that they didn't want to talk about it. They couldn't talk about it. They didn't want to remember. They didn't want their children to have any curiosity or recollection of what had happened for fear that they would be targeted themselves by the very same powers that chase these people away from their homelands. So that's kind of my backstory, but I was coming of age during the social revolution of bra burning, and hippies and psychedelics and rock music and all these, the Black Panther Party, the transition out of the civil rights movement into the Black Power movement. And it was an incredible time to be alive. It was an incredible time to be alive. We were, all of us, very conscious about what was happening socially and politically, but we were also having a great time being young people. And some of it was a distraction, but most of it was having opportunities and taking advantage of a lifestyle and a freedom that our parents and our grandparents never, ever dreamed of. Well, may have dreamed of. And so we, as the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, became the dreams of our ancestors. You know, we were able to do things that our grandparents never even imagined. I remember one time, my grandmother, she lived to be 96 years old, same as my mother, actually. And I was at the time, which I'll get to that story later, but I was at the time living in Europe. And one year I came home to visit, and of course went to visit my grandmother, still living in that same village in Western Pennsylvania. And I said, Grandma, when are you going to come to Europe to visit me? When are you going to come to London to visit me? And my grandmama said, well, baby, I'll come long as the Greyhound bus will carry me. And so imagination that I have, of course, I'm imagining this Greyhound bus, which I have taken many, many times, and many times with my grandmother in the segregated back section of the bus down south. And I just had this vision of this Greyhound bus with the driver and the steering wheel with wings on it, and my grandmother in the window waving, just, very fun and very imaginative. But those were the kinds of memories that I had. She was an incredible woman. My great grandmother, whom I did also meet, who remained in South Carolina until her death, who also lived to be 96. Seems to be the magic number, doesn't it? She was a midwife and actually birthed nearly every child born in Darlington County between 1890 and 1960.
Thank you so much for that sharing. That's really lovely. I really appreciate that. You see, we treasure those stories so much. You see, if I want to ask you, now you are telling me the story of your grandparent. We haven't moved more into yours. We are coming there just now. But I want to tempt you to see if it is possible to learn about your grandparents talking about their own grandparent. Like, what did they tell you of their own infancy when they were growing up as children? What did they recollect? What do we know about that?
Wow. Well, you have to understand that when I was a child, my father was nearly 60 years old. And when I was a teenager, when I was about 15 years old, my father was retirement age. So I have a couple of stories, well, one story in particular, but I will tell you, aside from knowing both my maternal and paternal grandmothers, I only knew my maternal grandfather because my paternal grandfather had already passed away by the time I was born, and my maternal great-grandmother. So I had personal experiences of them all. One of the very interesting stories is that my grandfather would never talk about his family. And after doing some research, I actually did find his relatives. My grandfather had 5 siblings, and all of the grandchildren of those siblings never knew that any of us existed. So we didn't know that each other existed, but we found one another. And snippets of stories have come out that there may have been some kind of terror that encouraged them all to leave South Carolina and scatter and never divulge the acknowledgement of each other or each other's whereabouts. And this is what we believe happened in my maternal grandfather's family, that there was a murder or some kind of a horrible thing that the entire family had to split up and run away from South Carolina, not divulging any information about their siblings for fear that they might be found. And so because of that, we never knew anything about my grandfather's family. One of my mother's sisters remembered, she told me this story before she passed away, that there was a man that came with a daughter and they stayed for 2 days, but my grandfather never explained who they were, but she remembered their names, and those names actually popped up in the family tree. So we are aware that there was a secret that prevented us from knowing one another. And it was very distressing for us to learn that we had this family for 100 years and never knew about one another. So there's that story. But on my paternal grandparents' side, my father's mother was a domestic, and eventually she emigrated to the United States, and she actually lived with us. We all lived in the same house. Both my grandparents, my maternal grandmothers, and my maternal and paternal grandmothers, and my maternal grandfather, we all lived together. So as I said, I was a treasured child because I had immediate access to 3 generations of family members. It was incredible. Nobody beats a grandma. I can tell you that right now. Grandmothers are treasures. Believe me when I tell you. They'll do anything for their grandchildren, much better than parents. Well, anyway, my paternal grandmother was a Barbadian woman. She had 5 children, and she worked for the Cunards. The Cunards were a British shipping family. Now, this is a very interesting story because when I went to England, my ex-husband was British. Well, he's still British. He's just not my husband anymore. But my daughter was born in the UK, and her godfather, also a British man, was married to an American woman, and that's how I met him. His grandmother was my grandmother's employer. And I never knew this until one day he was visiting. He was a curator and a collector and an artist representative, and he was representing some artists and came to New York to go to an auction at Sotheby's, and asked me if he could, called me and said, Deirdre, my family are not answering the phone and they actually live in your neighborhood. Do you think it would be all right if I could come and spend the night, because I have this event tomorrow? Well, of course, I've known this man now for 20 years. He knows my mother. My mother was still alive at the time and living in this very house. And so we invited him over, we had dinner, and they started talking, and she started telling him about her husband who came from Barbados. And he said, oh, that's interesting because my grandmother lived in Barbados. So my mother's trying to figure out, well, what were white people doing living in Barbados? And he said, yes, my grandmother went to Barbados right before the war. Really, the World War II went into full drive. They had the money, they could escape war. And they were shipping magnates, and they went to Barbados to get away from the European theater of war. And this woman hired my grandmother as her handmaiden, if you will. And it was because this friend of mine that I'd known for 20 years sat down and had a conversation with my mother over dinner about a topic that we never discussed, learned that my paternal grandmother was his grandmother's employee. And that was how we figured out that these poor Barbadians managed to get to the United States. You can't make this stuff up, can you? You really can't. Yeah, it is. So our family somehow connected to the Cunards. Don't ask me how that happened, but it's everything is that expression 6 degrees of separation is real, because we find ourselves connected to one another through very strange links in society, through bloodlines, through immigration, through displacement, through lots of channels.
Absolutely.
People find one another.
Absolutely. I remember, in the beginning of this project, which is the journey, I basically started to recount the story of African descent in northern Italy because that is where I live. Having come here, I sort of try to ask myself, but these other people that are like me, but far away from Africa, of course, many of them were not Nigerians. I will try to tell their story. What is your story? Why are you here? I am pretty new here at the time, but I was sort of curious. I wanted to know what is their story. That is how we actually started. And I wrote 2 books from that project, and I produced, a couple of documentaries which were screened here. And I even won an award, with one of them. So I remember at one point in the book, The Journey, that is also the title of the book, Africans in Verona, I was saying that we are all in a journey, actually, that now we left Africa, we come to Europe. And then, of course, I make a kind of reference to the immigration before. Actually, that is not immigration. The stealing of African people, and that were stolen from Africa that take it to the different parts of the world, where we say, no, this will never happen again. But now we see it repeating itself again. In fact, several tens of thousands of Africans have died in the Mediterranean in the recent years in their attempt to cross to Europe. And it's going on continuously. It doesn't stop. Every now and then we hear a boat sinking in the Mediterranean. This is something that we could stop, but we haven't stopped it. For some reason, it's still happening. So the question is, who are we now in this journey? We are more than just immigrants. We are now a global family. We are now larger than is supposed to be, like just few immigrants coming around, Because when you look at the larger African diaspora community, I often say here, we are hundreds of millions of people scattered all over the world, particularly in Western countries. So we need to look for a way to connect. We need to look for a way to leverage who we are, our story, our experiences. You see how beautiful your story is, talking about how the people were dispersed, but now you find yourself after hundreds of years. We don't need to take this lightly. This is important. This is important for you, for the community you are part of in the United States, but also for the larger African diaspora people. Hundreds of millions of people. This is important for us. We don't want to think that this is just casual. No, this is important. All right, this is the question I have for you, Lovell. You meet this your distant relative now. You talk. You establish a connection. Now, what happened to that connection? What do you do about it now? Are you still connected? What do you do about that? Haven't reconnect yourself now?
Well, thank you for that question, because boy, oh boy, do I have a story for you. In my journey, I have always been, because I am an only child, I have always been in the company of a very large group of cousins. I think when we were at full mass, and we've lost many over the last decade. We've lost a lot of family members. I think I had about 35 first cousins. That's a lot of first cousins. And those were the ones that I knew, right? We were always together. Every weekend, we were part of a gathering that either had to do with my father's Masonic brothers, or my mother's family, or my father's family, or all of them together. So I was always deeply and richly connected to all my family members. I was always the diplomat that made them speak to one another because I didn't have an axe to grind. I didn't have any sides to take. I've always been the ear that listened to and kept everyone's confidences. So over the years, and recently, I would say about 12 years ago, I became a member on Ancestry.com. And I thought, oh, well, this will be fun. I might as well look, because people are starting to leave us and people's memories are fading. So let me just get some information to jog some memories. And when I started to input data, a name popped up and a person reached out to me saying that there were names that appeared on his family tree that appeared on mine, and he thought that we might be related. And I thought, oh, this is some guy trying to pick me up on the internet. So I said, well, if you think you're my relative, send me a photograph and I'll let you know. Well, he did send me a photograph, and he was the doppelganger of my mother's brother. So that unnerved me. And we started a conversation, and he asked me to gather the family together because he had been doing some research and he wanted to share it with as many family members as possible. So I did that. And I gathered about 10 family members together, and he came down from Rochester, New York, and brought his presentation. And I was so overwhelmed by the amount of time that he had invested in this research, but also that he was a person of modest means. He was a veteran. He was of modest means. And he said that, and I asked him the very question that you're asking me, why? And he said, well, Dee, one night I went to sleep and I had a dream. And he said, a male ancestor came to me and said, it is your job to remember this family. You have to bring them all together. And he said, I can't do it. I don't have the means. I don't have the inclination. I don't have the cooperation. I can't do it. And he said, the ancestor in his dream said, you can read, can't you? And he said he woke up and it was as though he was driven on a mission, and every question that he asked was answered, and he seemed to have been guided to go to different places to obtain information. He found family members all over the country. He found that there was a common ancestor that was the one of 12 sons, and these 12 sons scattered around the country after manumission, which was the abolition of slavery. But the common ancestor was a twin born to a couple who came from this region that was known as Cameroon, that is known as Cameroon now, the territory. And he was born a twin, and he and his brother were Revolutionary War veterans. And this gentleman, Ishmael Titus, who is my family's common ancestor, was made known to us by the descendant of a patriot officer in the military the American military, the ragtag crew, as we call them, who were fighting the British for independence. And my common ancestor, Ishmael Titus, appears in his ancestors' journals as a person who was a mercenary, who was a very, very strong presence in the war theater in North Carolina, in Virginia, and Tennessee. So I have an ancestor who was a Revolutionary War veteran. And the research that my cousin Solomon found brings us to Massachusetts, where his remains are buried. And by an act of fate, the professor of Africana Studies at Williams College used our common ancestor as the subject of her curriculum, and her students unearthed some history, not only about our ancestor, but about Massachusetts, about the northern states and the way the northern states responded to slavery, to Blacks leaving the South, coming to the North. The way the American landscape and the fabric of American society was based on free labor, and why it is now that everyone feels the need to unionize and to have better wages. It is because the United States is not accustomed to paying for labor. And we have undone our own economy by moving manufacturing to other countries so that it can be done cheaper, so that profits can be higher. And it is just the fabric of what this country is based upon, free labor. And my mother gave me that expression. She said, if you're ever able to unionize, if you have a job and you work for someone, it's important to unionize, because America is the home of free labor. And don't you ever forget that. So those incidents and this historical understanding about who my family are and how we came to be here and what our experiences are, by some extraordinary turn of events, my enslaved grandfather, maternal grandfather's family, or someone in the circle, was able to send him to college. An African-American male who went to a college in the South, Benedict College, as a matter of fact, in like 1915, my grandfather was educated, and he and his wife and 3 young babies living in Newport News, Virginia, were actually run out of town because my grandfather owned a house and a car when the Depression broke out. So the white people in Newport News, Virginia, felt that he was occupying a property and a job that should have belonged to a white man. So they gave him until sunrise to get out of town, which he did, and took his family north to Western Pennsylvania from Virginia. It's not that far, maybe 200 or 300 miles. but that was as far as the car would take them. And we never talked about the car. We never talked about the humiliation of being driven from the home that you owned, of having crosses burned on your front lawn, or being threatened. And, we have literary stories that detail this, and not just stories, but we have biographies and testimonies of people who have had these experiences. But when it is part of the fabric of your own ancestry and it's part of your story, it makes you very emotional, and it makes you query what direction and what path am I on socially and conscientiously, and how do I do my part to create a better understanding and an elevated consciousness in my children, my nieces, my nephews, my cousins, my friends. How do we take these stories and build a conscientiousness that redirects us back to our humanity and back to nature, back to the way nature intended us to behave with her, with nature, with the planet, but also as human beings with each other. We are the only species that kills for sport. Every other sentient being on the planet only kills to eat. There may be one other, I think a chimpanzee, that will fight to vanquish the other monkey because he's feeling threatened, but not just to go out and vanquish another of the species, because they depend on one another. And somehow human beings have, or some human beings, or some species of humanoid have convinced themselves that they can supersede nature. Not on this planet, you can't. Not on this planet, because it is cyclical. And each species, from the microscopic to the most intelligent, which I think might be the whale, certainly are all interconnected with one another. And it's only certain types of human beings who think that they control, that they are in control. Nature is in control, and we have to respect her, because that is the cycle and the rhythm that our lives rely upon. And it is also reminiscent of how endogenous people perceive their place in the world and how they live. And it is in a system frequently called Ubuntu, which translates into I am because we are. We are one. I only exist because we exist. And this philosophy flies in the face of individualism. The nuclear family is a joke. It's a joke. The idea that we can function independently of each other is, it's a bill of goods we've been sold, I believe, to make us consumers and dependent, give our power away, make us dependent on a force that has absolutely no good intentions for us as fellow humans.
Thank you so much.
So,
Now, I like to ask you something there, no, because
sure.
I like where the conversation is going. And just now we're moving into you as a person. We're still looking at the background, the story, where you are coming from, which I see to be very important for the people that are listening to us, and also for the intention we have here in this podcast and in our project, which is about connection, connecting the dots together. Sometimes I say, when we are doing this work, it is not on us to finish everything. We are just part of it. Maybe what we need to do is to just join the line where we are. It is not, like you were saying before, there are some people who believe that this world belongs to them. Well, that is from a limited perspective, a limited point of view. The world is supposed to be for all of us. Every one of us is supposed to be part of it. And like you said, life in Africa, in African philosophy, you are not considered a man just because you are smart or you are able to think. I think, therefore I am, is too poor in Africa to be used as a description of who a man is. A man, therefore, must be described in relation with other men, and not all, with nature too, with your environment, with how you relate with them. Now,
That's right.
what does that even mean? Well, what it means is that if you understand that to be the basis of who you are, it becomes almost obligatory, not almost, it becomes exactly obligatory for you to respect your nature, to respect where you find yourself, so that there is a delicate balance that we must respect. Without that, we cannot exist. So it is not out of intelligence to understand that you depend also on other things other than just your ability to think. I think, therefore I am. Who are you? Without the other, you are nobody.
Nobody. Exactly.
All right. Coming back to this, tapping into our connection, the history, learning about us. What are we supposed to do with it? How are we supposed to leverage this knowledge of our origin to be able to better position ourselves, to be able to better preserve ourselves, to function better in this world that we are, so that people can finally come to understand that there are many ways to see reality. It is not just one way. We cannot all see reality through the face of a certain amount of people. All of us are part of it. So how can our knowledge of our ancestors help us in this?
That's a very good question. That's a wonderful question. And a way that I can answer it is called Seselelame. Seselelame is an Ewe, a Volta region of Ghana, an ethnic group of Ghanaians who are with the role of keeping the culture alive through music and movement and dance, movement, music, rhythm, drumming, song. And their philosophy of Seseleleme it means to understand the world through the body. And in so doing, again, I am because we are is basically about being in community, physically being in community with others, taking time to be with other human beings. That's number one. Everything starts with a conversation. We cannot be with each other and help each other if we don't know each other. And we don't know each other if we don't speak to each other, if we don't communicate with each other. Because to know me is to love me, right? We absolutely must find a way to bridge the gap of communication. It's not a racial gap, a gender gap, an age gap, a language gap. It is the communication of the soul, and your body language emits what is going on inside. Your tongue is connected to your heart. So whether or not you want to tell the truth, you can't help yourself. When you lie, you tell the truth because it reveals what is on the heart. And I say these things because in the last few years, the global experience of the COVID-19 pandemic did the worst thing that could have happened to people. It separated them. It separated people from one another. And in this isolation is where we lose our humanity. It's why prisons are so effective in turning people into savages, because they are separated from each other in community. Everybody is there doing their time. They are not healing as a group. They are not in conversation about how to be better human beings, how to help one another. To live my best life is to live my life in service to others. Dr. King said that. Toni Morrison said in a lecture that I heard at Cornell University in 1999, she said, our inability to communicate is tantamount to an intellectual stroke. I never forgot that expression. And she said so many incredible things, but can you see it? Can you see it? When people can't talk to one another, you see people have road rage in cars. They're upset because the traffic's not going fast enough, or somebody cut them off, and all of a sudden they've lost their minds. What kind of a society are we living in where people behave in this way? And this is savagery. It is the height of the absence of civilization, that we are unable to speak and communicate and to express compassion and care. I think it's what the human heart wants to do, but the conditioning overrides it. And you have to be a very powerful person. You have to be a very strong individual to not to succumb to the conditioning, because the conditioning forces self-hatred first. Because when you love yourself, and I don't mean to make this a meme that, love yourself. It really is about taking the time to understand yourself, to understand who you are and what you're capable of, and what your purpose in life can be, and how deeply you affect the lives of other people just by being in the room, not even by doing anything, just your presence has tremendous impact. And I believe that we have to find this self, this understanding of self, this recognition of what the self is or who we think it is, and how it radiates out into the the vibration of others. It's science, it's physics, it's physiology, it's anatomy, it's biology. Everything is everything. Everything is connected. Everything moves in synchronicity, in rhythm. Your body moves in rhythm. Your heart beats in a rhythm. All the systems in your body obey a rhythm. The seasons are in a rhythm. Time is in a rhythm. Everything that we do is rhythmically based. And when you try to deviate from the rhythm, you just end up out of sync. Out of sync.
That's so correct. That's so true. One time I was interviewing a scholar of African spirituality here. Now he was telling me you cannot separate anything at least from African understanding, from the African cosmology and philosophy and understanding of life. Everything is the same. Everything is connected. I think a very typical example that everybody can understand is I don't want to go into medicine, for example, from how medicine is seen in the West, or modern medicine, if you want to call it like that, from how medicine is seen in the traditional sense of it, or African traditional medicine.
Oh, yes, please. Let's go down that rabbit hole. That was one of my manifestations. I was a holistic healthcare practitioner and a massage therapist for 15 years. So
all right. Let's touch that. Let's touch that a little bit. In that here, I've also interviewed other persons, also from the medical field, who are they are medical field here practicing in Europe, but they have an African background. So sometimes they have told me that here, medicine seems to look like they seem to look at a human being as if they are dismembering the body, and they want to treat a certain part of the body, like just the eyes. They want to treat just the eyes.
That's correct.
The African understanding is that you cannot treat just the eyes, because the eyes is not alone. If you treat only the eyes, maybe the problem is not the eyes. The problem might be even the head, or maybe the legs. If you fix the eyes and you don't fix the source of the problem will come back again to the eyes. But if you have so effectively treated the eyes, it will move to the ear, because the problem is still there. So this is, of course, dealing with the African understanding of life, that every part of us is part of us. So that, I repeat it again, of course, then I'm pose the question to you, that if we understand this as a basis, it will be a crime for us to destroy nature, to destroy any part of us. Because any part of the world that you destroy is going to reverberate and it's going to affect you no matter where you want to go. Of course, we see a lot of billionaires today talking of maybe they want to go to Mars or go to some other places. But at least for now, this earth is the only place we have got. We must live our life according to the balance that we have. If we don't, it's going to affect us. You cannot run away from that. All right, let's come back to the medicine again, because I believe you have something to say there. Please go ahead and share with us.
I do, and it will irritate so many professionals. People give a lot of credibility to higher education, which we all do. And I would say it's not so much higher education, it is the ongoing quest for knowledge. Because I know a number of people who are highly educated and dumber than dirt That I know. I know people, my great grandmother, for example, couldn't read, but boy, could she deliver a baby. She could deliver a breech baby. She could deliver a premature baby and keep it alive. And now we have obstetricians who study for 12 years and they cannot deliver a breech baby without opening the mother's stomach. And so that's just an aside, and that I didn't need to go down that rabbit hole. But the idea of compartmentalization, it is a disease. That's what I believe. The disease is not the thing that they're seeking to fix. The quivering eye, or the pain in the knee, or the pain in the shoulder, or the broken arm, or the blood disease, or all of these diseases, these pathologies that keep creeping up. And we are looking for a panacea to stop the onslaught of symptoms without dealing with why the organism is experiencing dis-ease in the first place. And it is a very backward way of looking at things from my perspective. But the reason why this prevails is because the desire for wealth, for financial power and wealth and dominion over others, and dominion over others so that we can keep the flow of wealth moving in one direction. And it's so sad that we live in a society that values profit over the lives of children, and the value of a dream deferred. A young person who may have had the most amazing potential cut short because they've been given the wrong information about their health, or that they bled out during childbirth because no one paid attention to what was happening in the whole body. Because our education tells us, well, no, we have to do it like this. This is the procedure and this is the protocol, without even questioning it, without even questioning that this has not resulted in satisfactory outcomes. Even if it is the protocol, it doesn't mean that we have to keep it. If you're in a bad marriage, get out of it. Why get married to the wrong idea and then dig your heels in because that's all you know? We don't know what we don't know. And that's the beauty of it. We don't know what we don't know. And the only thing that you can do is keep an open mind, which is not something that you get to do in a society that conditions you to think unilaterally, to think in one direction, to think with the arrogance that everything that I know is right and anything else that anyone has to offer is invalid. And that is the nature of the Western influence around the world over so many centuries. And it's just the domination by force and by violence. Because basically, at the end of the day, you have something that I want. Give it to me, or I will annihilate you. That's that's true.
I don't know how people manage to even call that a civilization. Because I think even the animal have beginning to come out of that. I was saying a couple of days ago, I was interviewing somebody. I said, even look at the relationship that exists between the lion and the antelope.
Yes.
Everybody knows that the lion can kill and eat the antelope any day. But the lion don't just go and start killing the antelope just like that. The lion only kill the antelope when he want to eat. If you are not hungry, you want to eat, leave it alone. That is part of nature. Can we manage to keep a little balance so that because can we even understand that we are all part of the game? Because if we understand that now, it means my point of view is right from my point of view, but are there other point of view to the same issue?
Well, this is a great conversation. This is what we come to learn as ways of being and ways of doing. And I can say categorically that when the level of arrogance, and I think that always comes into play whenever our egos are elevated, when one believes that they have more to offer than someone else, or they have more power, or they're stronger, or they're bigger, or that it sets them apart. It makes them unique and special, not realizing that every human being has a quality that can and must be utilized in the survival of the species. So, in a pride of lions, there is the hierarchy based on the alpha male or the alpha female, not because he's a terror or he bullies the others or he growls and he snares at everybody. He bullies them. They rely on him as the alpha to make the decisions that will protect the pride. Now, when you think about that in terms of this chest-beating gorilla alpha that the Western world has made us believe is the ultimate in masculinity or femininity, it's the most aggressive, it's the loudest, it's the one that gets all the others to cower. That is not the way nature works. I want to say that again. That is not the way nature works. Nature does not base its cycles on the whim of one individual in a collective. It does not base its cycles of natural order, reproduction, decay, fall away, death. It's not based on one thing. It is based on all moving and working together. If the alpha, if his only job is to threaten, or her only job is to threaten, to humiliate, to create fear, if that's their only job, then the other job that they have is to protect their position. Because if that's what they're doing, trust and believe somebody is watching them to do the same. So this protectionist idea is based on fear. And so all of these people that we look up to as leaders and and alphas and the people who are the most dominant. I have another word for them. And it's not flattering. And it's not alpha. And it's not courageous. Because unless you are in service, your strength is insignificant. Oh, it shows up. Oh, it definitely shows up. Oh, it definitely can shut me down. Oh, it can definitely hobble me or make me disappear. But it's insignificant. It means nothing because all you can do is look over your shoulder. That's all you can do. You cannot get on with the purpose of advancing. You're stuck where you are because you're always looking over your shoulder to determine if somebody is trying to kill you or replace you or disassemble you.
Thank you so much for that, Lovell. All right, now let's talk a little bit about you. So I want you to tell me, now that you've gotten the information that you learned about your origin, your people, and of course you have gotten education, what kind of vision do you see for yourself going forward?
Well, my ambitions in my twilight years is to write. I have a friend who published her first book at 101 years old. Amazing woman. She was in the first class at, oh gosh, what's the name of the university here in Manhattan? It is now a co-ed college, but she was the first in the first graduating class, and it'll come to me. I'm sorry, I lost the name of the college, but it's on the Upper West Side, upper 60s. Anyway, so she published her first book when she was 101. Her name is Be Clear. Can you imagine it? Be Clear, right? And I see myself really becoming a writer, or writing my thoughts, writing reminiscing my stories. And I also see myself as I already am, the godmother of many, a mentor for many others. This affectionate nomenclature, Mama D, is the way some young people and some of my mentees experience me as a mother figure, because care, nurturing is important to me because I was nurtured, and I know how important that is, not just by my parents, but by my mentors and by adults that crossed my path as a student and as a young professional in the arts industry and as a professional in the business community, that people helped me. They helped me. They cared about what I did, even when I didn't, even when I was unsure and insecure and not following the path. There were always guides, and they never judged me. And when I didn't listen, they just gently backed away and were able to be so happy to know that eventually I did get it. I did. I would say that I am on hand to share everything that I know about everything that I know, and also remind people that I don't know what I don't know, but I'm open to always having a new experience, having another perspective or another way of seeing and doing things. That's that's I think that's my future. I'm just, I'm the granny, I'm going to be the granny. But that that maybe that woman who allows younger women and younger men too to think about all the components of their young lives that are going to lead them into their elder years, if they make it that far, because a lot of us don't make it. But if there's some way that we can start to pay attention to where we are now, it helps us understand how we got here from there and how we're going to get to where we're going based on where we are right now. So I think the lesson for me would be, or the ambition for me is to just remind people of how powerful they are, how really powerful they are, and how every decision that they make is a power move in whatever direction the power moves. It is a power move. So these decisions and every decision that we make is actionable. We act upon what we believe and what we think and what we feel is going to be pleasurable or desirable. The quest really is to see all things as results, all things that happen to us as results of the decisions that we've taken. And yeah, and that what happens in our lives is a direct consequence of decisions that we've made, no matter how amazingly wonderful they are or how horrific they are. And that each of these consequences or results amount to a lesson that we can grow from, or that we can learn something new about who we are. I have an expression that says, I love you because I trust you. I trust you because I believe you. I believe you because I love you. And so the cycle goes. And so the rhythm goes. But this also applies to self. I love myself because I trust myself. I trust myself because I believe myself. I believe myself because I love myself. And so the circle goes. And you can't love who you don't trust, right? You don't trust a person, you can't love them. And that includes yourself. So these are the morsels that I share with all of my children, biological and no.
Thank you so much for that, Lovell. I remember that in our pre-interview conversation, you did say something to the effect of saying yes to multi-intelligence.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to expand on that for those who were not here, who were not there with you, who did hear what you told me. Please share with us what you want people to learn about that.
Well, again, here we go. just reminding people of how incredible they are. Because if you drink the Kool-Aid, you'll think that you're one horse carriage. Well, I can't do that. I only know how to do this. I can't do that because I wasn't trained. I can't do that because I don't speak the language. I can't. And it's just like this din of failure. And it doesn't have to be like that, because when you say yes to new experiences, you open up your brain to receive downloads that give you skills that you didn't even know were possible. I am a college dropout. I'm not proud of it, but it is what it is. But at one point, I was speaking 5 languages. We only spoke English in my house and Creole, like patois from the West Indies, from the Caribbean, and a little bit of Geechee talk from the people in this, but it was always English. And I learned to speak other languages because I needed to do it. But I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't believe that I had multiple intelligences. I have spatial intelligence. I was a professional dancer for 20 years. I have physical awareness, spatial intelligence. I have auditory intelligence. I have visual intelligence. I have, in the last couple of years, become a visual artist. I didn't know I could do that until I didn't know. And my stuff is not bad. I have to say that too. But it really is about allowing yourself to be open to learning something new. I had an exercise given to me about 35 years ago, maybe 40 years ago. Someone said, I want you to write down everything you know how to do. And I said, what, everything? I said, every single thing. Can you read? Can you write? Everything you know how to do? Can you cook? Can you? And so I started going down the list. And on that list, there was silversmithing, knitting, crocheting, sewing, dancing, swimming, diving, skydiving. I mean, I was, huh? I know how to do all these things. I forgot I knew. How do you forget? Well, exactly. But I'm not alone. Everybody that I know is a genius. And I can act, I can sing, who knew? I didn't know that. I can even remember some scientific formulas. I'm an aromatherapist. Like all of these skills that we have that for some reason get parked in the parking lot of our distant memory and lost because we don't exercise exercise our intelligences. All of us have multi-intelligences. That's what makes the human brain so powerful. And it's what gives us the potential to do incredible things. There is absolutely no reason that we are using fossil fuel, that we are farming the way we're farming, that we have polluted air, that our the waters are polluted. There's no reason for it. There's no reason for it. Everything is reusable and recyclable. It needs to be, because that is the rhythm and the cycle of nature, of the nature of the planet that we live on. And if we could just get with that, and that's what multiple intelligences are for, so that we can do like the starfish does. When it loses a limb, it grows another one, you know? Whenever, stem cells, whenever stem cells are needed in other parts of the body, they just go where they're needed. Instead of going, oh, well, boy, I'm sorry, we're just gonna have to let that foot die. I can't help. I'm a lung cell. There's nothing I can do for you. Your body doesn't behave that way. Nothing in nature behaves that way. But if we see ourselves as separate, as disembodied, as unattached, uncommunicative, then it's impossible for us to thrive, survive, coexist, collaborate, communicate.
Thank you so much for this. This is really powerful. And you see, this is absolutely in agreement with what we were talking about before, talking about the philosophy of Ubuntu, the philosophy that all of us are together. You see, I was making an example in one of my books in 2010. In 2010, I wrote a book, a research book about underdevelopment in Africa. And I titled the book, Underdevelopment in Africa, My Hands Are Clean. I was actually trying to challenge some people in Africa, or let me just say, challenge the African people to ask ourselves, where is my responsibility in what is going on? Then, of course, in the book, I talked about a lot of things from slavery to the neo-colonialism to the politics that we have today. Then at one point, I was talking about the Niger Delta, which is actually one of the richest parts of the world. But this land had been destroyed by oil exploration.
Yes.
Now, I was saying, let's talk about development.
By the way, yeah. Mr. Sarah Weaver's daughter is a friend of mine.
That's good to note. So I was saying,
I know the story.
Yeah, yes. I was saying, let's talk about the Niger Delta, for example. Let's use common sense. Because before then, I said development should be tapping into the local resources for the benefit of the local people.
Absolutely.
It is not about tapping the local resources for the benefit of some people somewhere. That is not development. That is called exploitation.
Exploitation. Yes.
Now, I say, let's say what we are talking about is development, which is using the local resources to resolve the problem of the local people. I say, now, let's look at the scenario. Let's say, because the pollution of the Niger Delta is caused by multinational oil company coming from Europe. Let's say this oil company were originally from the Niger Delta. I'm going to a philosophy just now. I said, these local people, we understand that their life depends on this land, that therefore they cannot destroy this land, meaning everything they do in the exploration of the oil in the Niger Delta must respect the people and the ecosystem. Because that is what Kensaro Wiwa was key for in 1995.
That's correct.
That we need to respect the ecological balance of the Niger Delta. And he was keyed for that. All right. So I said, these people, if the company was owned by local people, they would never do what they did in the Niger Delta. Now I said, okay, let's flip it around. Let's say Niger Delta was somewhere in Italy or in UK or in Germany, and the Europeans are going to explore this oil. Will they do what they have done in the Niger Delta? The answer also is no. Why? Because they know that this is their land. They don't want to destroy their land. But you see, Niger Delta is not the only place you have oil that are being explored by the European. Norway also have oil. Norway is in Europe. But why have they not destroyed Norway? Because they want oil. is a common sense. They know what they are doing is wrong, but they do it anyway because they believe that the other people do not count, that the other people are not part of the equation. They don't have right. They cannot be respected. They cannot hold them accountable. Therefore, they are useless. Anything can be done to them.
You have something that I want. Give it to me or I will kill you. Now, let me just say this about that because you make a very valid point. Indigenous people, people who live on the land, have been set up for exploitation by very, very greedy, demonic people. And that's the only way that I can describe it. Just, thinking about King Leopold of Belgium and thinking about Cecil Rhodes and thinking about all of those, Adolf Hitler and all of those people. But let me say this about that, because this is what I recognize that is now happening in America. That luxury home developments are being built on toxic waste dumps. So people who have now a lot of money are living on waste sites. They don't know that they're waste sites, but it's coming forward that it's waste sites because their children are being born with handicaps. Their families are developing cancers and all kinds of autoimmune diseases and uncontrollable diseases, and nobody knows where they're coming from. My point in making this point is that the beast always eats its young. So, like Nimola said, when they came for the trade unionists, I said nothing because I wasn't a trade unionist. When they came for the socialist, I said nothing because I wasn't a socialist. When they came for the Jews, I said nothing because I'm not a Jew. And when they came for me, there was no one left to speak for me. So when these people who now find themselves at the cutting edge of the loss of manufacturing because everything has been made cheap for them because they've always had the money and the advantage and every right, and life was good for them. So now they have established a standard of living that can no longer be sustained. Why? Because the way you earned your money has now been exported to a country where the people can be exploited. So now you've lost your job, you're about to lose your home, you cannot maintain the standard of living that you have become accustomed to. Your family is sick, you get injured, and now all your children are opioid addicts. And all of a sudden now, all of these people who have had all these rights and all of these privileges for all of these years find themselves on the same side as the nigger.
It turns around because you see, you cannot destroy any part of the human society and think it doesn't affect you. No, it doesn't affect you now. But wait, nature is patient. Nature is patient. It's going to repay you in your own kind. In fact, it's going to multiply it for you. Absolutely. Don't destroy the earth because this is our home.
So here's my point. So all of these cattle ranchers, all of these people who made oil wells that eviscerated the indigenous people in on Turtle Island, which is what the United States, North America, was called by the endogenous people of this continent, that they wiped them out to get the land. And then they killed millions of buffalo. They like wiped out their food source. Who does this? Who does this? But you're thinking, I'm going to kill the buffaloes so that the Indians will starve. But in killing the buffalo, you also decimate other sentient species that maintain the integrity of the soil and the land. And this compartmentalization, the same way that it's used and the same way that it's done in medicine, is the way they treat. So like, oh, I can dump stuff in the ocean, and if I dump it up here, it's going to go out to sea. Nobody downstream is going to be affected. Or then
what kind of intelligence is that?
And so it makes me really conscientious as to why Black people are the way we are. We're so forgiving because it is the nature of the planet, but only up to a certain degree. Only up to a certain degree. I remember my grandmother saying something like, you know, those poor people, referring to white Americans, because she didn't know Europeans. Of course, she had no understanding of that, except the European immigrants who came, before the war to work in the coal mines. The new immigrants, so they were Italian, Polish, and I think some German immigrants came early in that in the immigration process. And the Germans who left Germany at the turn of the century were mostly Jewish people. And a lot of them did actually go out to Western Pennsylvania because this was where there was land and where there were jobs, in the steel mills, in the coal mines, and in the farms. But the idea that we are a nation of immigrants that come from different places, and what makes America so interesting is how the homogenization of all these cultures comes together in a way that is uniquely American. And it shows up in our food, it shows up in our music, it shows up in our attitudes. But the attitudes of individualism, I think, are the thing that are going to become the most destructive for us, because it's too self-centered. And excuse my French, but we have another expression that says shit slides down the wall, not up the wall. And that means we get these habits from our leaders. We get these habits from people who put themselves in a position of leadership. And if these are the people that we allow to lead us, then it means that we have completely surrendered our power. And the only way that you can maintain your power is to resist what is being done to you and be willing to die for it. And that's something that no living thing wants to do. It is the nature of everything living to stay alive, survival. And as long as we believe that our survival is based on our submission to tyranny and our submission to exploitation, then that is all it will ever be. That is all life will ever be for us.
But that is not the way it should always be. That is why I think it is important to or to tell our story to the people so that they can understand where they are coming from. I am thinking that story is powerful. Of course, I have written a book series, 5 books in it about story, because I believe it is true. And every now and then we organize an audio event on LinkedIn talking about story because we believe it is true. Now, let me try to explain what I mean. You see, when an ego is hatched from the egg and a chicken is hatched in the egg, if you mix both of them together and tell them the same story, they will do the same thing, which means the ego will grow up to be an ego, but an ego in like a hen, like a fowl. It will never fly. Now, what does this mean? It means that if you know your root, if you know your story, if you know where you are coming from, you will have a better frame of reference. You see, there is a story I am actually working on just now. I'm working on the story of Africans from my town. I'm coming from Esan, which is the south of Nigeria. I am looking at a king from my town. His name is Agbanoje. He was a king in the 1400. In the 1400, America doesn't exist yet. But in this period, there was a lot of war that was fought. Of course, moving on, a hundred of years following that, of the people who will become African Americans. Because many people were taken away from that part of the land. Now the question is, knowing where you are coming from, does it make any sense to you? Of course, it makes a lot of sense. You know, what the European did, I do say this oftentimes when we are looking at the question of history. Because history, sometimes we have allowed other people to tell our history to us, and we have allowed ourselves to be shortchanged in that. I mean, these people, the European intermediary, they do the mediator between Africans at home and the African in the diaspora, have told a lot of lies, including that to the African in the diaspora, they have told them that their history started from slavery, which means anything other than that is not your history. You don't know anything. You have nothing. You have no root. And to the Africans in Africa, they have told them that their history started from colonialism. You don't know anything other than that. You were just roaming around in the forest. But now, I am talking of a history hundreds of years before the birth of the United States. You see, among the Esan people, if you want to go into marriage, you are a woman, one of the prerequisites is that you must learn how to do cutting work, that you know how to weave the Esan dress, called the Ukmesan. Why all these are important for us is so that we don't, as the ego that we're supposed to fly, we don't become like the chicken, thinking that we are chicken, that our ancestors have never fly. Have you taken the time to examine the Omins, for example, Mesoamerican? Look at those images and ask yourself, where did they come from? I understand that the Europeans tried to cut out Egypt from Africa, that this is not Africa. But they have not been able to cut out the geography and take it somewhere in Germany or France or in the UK so that it can become their history. Because we are trying to look at the reality from the lens of another person. And it's going to hurt us.
That's correct.
Again, how can we reclaim this narrative so that we can use it to our own advantage? We should never allow somebody to tell our story for us. That is why we are intentional about the story of our people. Where are we coming from? What do you see as a solution?
Well, I want to tell you that one of the reasons why the stories have been lost is because of the abject cruelty of the enslavers. One of the methods was to mix people up mix up the ethnic groups so people were unable to speak the same language. So they had to then learn the enslavers' language and were only able to communicate with each other through a language that wasn't their own. Others had their tongues cut out so that they couldn't speak. They were not allowed to play drums because once they realized that they could communicate through drums, it was banned. They were punished or killed for communicating through drums. Very effective means of communication, might I add. So we have been conditioned for 300 or 400 years, not to talk to one another. Again, it brings me back to my conversation earlier about the importance of communication. And that also the body experiencing the world through the body gives us data. It gives our brains data. If you didn't have a body, your brain would be useless because all the data that comes into your brain comes through the physical experience of your body. And one of the things that happened, you'll hear this expression a lot, being used a lot now in sociology, psychiatry, and literature, the Black body, the experience of the Black body. And the experience of the Black body in the United States has been viscerally abusive, torture. It is as close to as close to the 9 stations of the cross as Christians can get. We don't need Jesus as an example. We've lived it. You know, that your body could be abused in any way, shape, or form. You could be lynched, you could be decapitated, you could have your limbs cut off, you could be sexually molested, male or female, didn't matter. You could be disemboweled, you could be chained, tethered and chained, you could be drowned, tortured. Ritualistic torture and murder are what African Americans have experienced. And these experiences become part of your genetic memory. And I'm not beating the victim drum here, but it takes a lot of undoing that African people managed to survive this is nothing short of miraculous. Because anybody else, any other group of people who have experienced what we have experienced have disappeared. They've disappeared. We're still here. So telling the stories, as painful as they are, is the only way for us to collectively remember ourselves, to remember our lineage, our heritage, our customs, our language, and you know, tradition is debatable. I often believe that sometimes traditions are the reason why things fall apart. Sometimes. Because as we move forward in time, traditions have to also regenerate. Traditions have to change with the changing population, with the changing climate, with the changing availability of certain crops, with the changing migration of animals, the changing climate, as I said earlier. So we have to rethink the things that we hold up as immovable. We can't hold on to things that do not allow us to motion forward as a species, as a family, as a community, as a nation, as a species. And I think that sometimes human beings are their own worst enemies because we have been conditioned to resist change. Now, what in nature doesn't change? You tell me, because I sure would like to know why I don't look the same way I looked 50 years ago.
That's a good question.
Right?
The fact sometimes is that some people want to change and they want to remain the same.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, what a confusion. What a confusion. You know, as a body worker and a massage therapist, one of the modalities that I worked on required that we did a postural and a gait analysis before we started to work on the client or the patient. And one of the indicators for emotional instability was a posture where the head rotated in one direction and the thoracic spine rotated in another. So basically, if you can see that, and it's very slight, but just that much of a change puts the nose in one direction and the sternum in another. So it means the head is walking in one direction and the heart is walking in another direction. Interesting. And this very slight adjustment changes completely the rhythmic function of your entire organ system of your organs. So it changed the way your respiratory system worked. It changed the way your heart and circulatory system work. It changed the way your digestive system, just because you were not lined up. You were not lined up. So this is a question that we must ask ourselves. Is my head and my heart lined up with one another? Am I working against myself or am I working with myself? Do I trust myself? I can't possibly trust myself if I'm moving in one direction and the other part of me is moving in another, you see? So self-examination is critical.
So true.
Yeah, it's critical.
All right. You will also say something in line with living your life, your best life in the service of other. And
Yes.
again, this is in what we are discussed before, no? That we need to understand that we are all part of the whole.
Yes.
If we take each of us out, we cannot really function as it were. I don't know if there is anything you want to say about that in relation to what you do in your profession, in your work, that you're actually in the service of other people. I find that to be really very important. What do you want to say about that to help the people to understand what you do?
Well, I'm retired. So in my life, I have been a professional performance artist. And I felt that I was in service because we made people happy. We gave people encouragement and we gave people joy to see us celebrating our bodies and celebrating musicians and celebrating stories. I was a teacher, so I taught dance and performing arts to students over a period of 20 years and influenced very many of whom I'm still in contact with, which I think is incredible. I have a student that I worked with in the 80s, in the 1980s, and he somehow found me through social media and told me that he was living in Australia and he often talked to his wife about me because of the way he was influenced by what he learned from me. And he works as an emergency, he's an emergency health person. So he drives an ambulance and they go and pick people up. I guess he's an EMS service person. And I just thought, God, from going from being a dancer to working in emergency services on the other side of the world, that someone carried my name to the other side of the world in a positive way. That's powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And being a teacher and then helping people realize their dreams, working with a documentary filmmaker that made movies about something that interested me, but then I helped him come to the end of his career in a loving way, in an industry that was really very hostile to him. And then to come repatriate back to the United States, because I was living in Europe at the time, repatriating back to the United States and working in the arts and helping other artists navigate funding and navigate administration and organization. And then, going after 9/11, going to Texas to work in science and scientific research and development in technology. How do you do that? I told you I'm a college dropout, right? I told you that I was a dancer, right? How do you go from being a dancer to being involved in scientific research and development at NASA? By saying, yes, I'm open. I'm open. I'm open to learn. I am open to understanding. God bless. This was, again, 6 degrees of separation. Again, I went to Texas to work with Dr. Mae Jemison, the first African-American female astronaut to go into space. And it was incredible working with her and getting to know her. And you talk about multiple intelligences. Good God. It was because of her that I realized how smart I was. I didn't know that until I met her. And not that I could ever compare my education or my educational pedigree or what I knew or what my experiences were with hers. But she lit a fire under me. She made me understand that there was absolutely no limit to how much I was entitled to know, and that I was able to know whatever I wanted to know. And so after that, deciding to go back to university as a mature biology major. So I'm in a class of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and I'm in my 40s. Good God. So anyway, so then that led to the body working and massage therapy, because the intention was to do physical therapy. And I realized that at the same time that I was in college, my daughter was in college. And so meeting those financial needs meant that by the time I matriculated, or that I would be able to afford matriculating from university, I would be the age that I am right now. And that was 20 some years ago. So here we are now going down another path. So this is about my fifth career. And then 15 years into my fifth career, my mother, my loving, beautiful mother, developed onset dementia. I had started a business in Texas. I was running a very successful massage therapy practice in Texas. I had an A-list client base, and I practiced on 4 continents. So I was hitting it. I was doing very, very well. But I had to make a decision. And my decision was to shut my business down, come back to New York, and take care of myself. And
Thank you for that service. Thank you for that service.
It was the best decision I ever made, because not only did I learn about my mother's life, because we only see our parents as our parents. Oh, that's just mom. But I was able to start going through the records and the documents and the things that were rolled up and stuck in canisters that needed to be framed, because they were documents that cover my walls of the accomplishments and the incredible lives that my mother and my father had, and the incredible life that they created for me. And I got to know my mother as a woman, as a human being, rather than just my mother. And as I nursed her for the last 12 years of her life through her illness, I realized that the purpose of being a carer, of being a nurturer, of being someone who supports the fabric of a community, that I was a support system. It wasn't that I just took care of my mother, but I was a support system. I was a support system for her. I was a support system for the family, because my mother was the last surviving sibling of her generation. Everybody in my mother's generation on both sides of my family were dead. She was the last survivor. And I became the fabric that maintained the integrity of our family's history and our family's legacy. And in so doing, I became familiar with other family members that I didn't know. I created a safe haven for people to tell stories that they didn't want to tell, or that they weren't able to tell earlier. And so I became the matriarch of my family. There's only one cousin surviving who's older than me. So I'm the second eldest female in my family right now. And it just really gave me another sense of purpose. I was my mother's keeper, yes, and her caregiver and her advocate and her responsible person. But I was also the person who had to collect the knowledge that would be needed very, very soon by other family members who became caretakers for elderly parents or elderly spouses. See?
Thank you so much for that, Lovell. You see, I am connected the dot, and I hope you have done so too. This is important. You see, in line with your narration in the beginning, you talked about your grandparent. Of course, then I provoked you more, telling me to tell me about the grandparent of your grandparent that we learn a lot of things from your explanation. And then at a point, you talked about a guy within your family lineage who have done a research and tried to unite the family. And he said that he had a dream, that he had this vision. And now, coming to what you do today and the experience that you had, being at a service to your mother, particularly in her early time, in her later time, in her later years, I can see a direct correlation in all of that. I mean, how do you feel about all of this? Because you are a connector now. You are sort of connecting everything together. And I want to believe that this is not by a coincidence, that this was really what you were supposed to do. But how do you feel about that?
I'm delighted. I feel as though the purpose that I was brought into this world to do, the purpose was to unite the family, because when the family is well, the neighborhood is well. When the neighborhood is well, the community is well. When the community is well, the city is well. When the city is well, the state is well. When the state is well, the country is well. When the country is well, the world is well. Everything starts with the family. It is our first experience of the human experience. Whatever it is that we learn as human beings starts with our first nurturers, who are our parents or our family members. And it's not always a blood tie. Some children's first families are adopted families or orphanages or strangers. But whoever it is and whatever it is, that becomes the basis for whoever it is that we become. So my purpose is to always be of a positive influence, no matter how short the time or the influence, or how long and intense the influence may be. However long it is that we are connected to each other, that my purpose will always be to promote communication, self-awareness, kindness, harmony, balance, respect, nurturing, loving, kindness. And I hope that I have demonstrated that in my life. I think I have, because I've received it. And there's an expression that lets us know you cannot ask for what you don't give. And I know that I have been the recipient many, many times, over and over and over, daily. I am the recipient of these types of love, this type of agape love. And it has to do with the way I see myself and what I radiate into the vibration, into the cosmic vibration. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you so much for that. And there is a lot of value there. You see, I titled the conversation as "Living My Best Life in Service to Others." And the conversation have actually been a testimony to that. That is perfect. Everything is in sync.
Yes, it is.
All right. Now,
Yes,
Lovell,
it is.
how can people find you? Those who want to learn more about you, who want to connect with you, or maybe they want to do business with you, share with them how they can reach you.
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not a great social media I don't use a lot of social media, but I am connected to Dr. S. Amaray through Embodiology, embodiology.com. I am connected to this wonderful, amazing human being because she was once my student and now I am her student. I am a perpetual student. So you can find me there or you can find me on LinkedIn, and I appreciate and will answer questions. I again don't engage a lot on social media because it's a little too time consuming for me. I have a lot of projects and things that I'm working on and places to go and people to see and things to do. So I operate very well in short messaging or in emails or on the phone. So there we are.
All right. That's great. In service to other, that is the central theme of the conversation.
Thank you.
So what would be your final thought here in accordance with that? Because now maybe that is something you wanted to say in line with that I didn't ask you, or maybe that is something you really want to highlight, but this is the final part. Please go ahead and share. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if I can do it. I'm going to try. There's a song that Abby Lincoln wrote. And, actually, the song talks about keeping your hands wide open if you're needing anything. She says, throw it away, because you can never lose a thing if it belongs to you. And when you are in service of others, you are constantly giving of yourself. But there's always enough of yourself to give if you are loving yourself and trusting yourself, trusting that and believing that you are in the flow, you are in an energetic flow, you are in an energetic exchange. Nothing is being taken from you. Nothing can be taken from you if it belongs to you, truly. In the way that we feel that we are emptying our cup and that our cup is not being replenished, it is because it is not coming from a place of abundance. It is coming from an ideology of lack. And the one thing that nature does not do is lack anything. There's so much, and we are so unaccustomed to tapping the resource that is us. We are always looking outside of ourselves for what we ourselves hold within. Our multiple intelligences give us the ability to generate whatever it is that we need. So we have to rely more on what comes from inside of us as opposed to what we acquire from others or what we are given by others or what we are allowed to do or be based on the ideas of others. And I just love this. This lyric that Abby Lincoln sings. She says, I'm going to try to sing it, and please feel free to edit this part. She says, I think about the life I live, a figure made of clay, and think about the things I lost, the things I gave away. And when I'm in a certain mood, I search the house and look. One night I found these magic words in a magic book. Throw it away. throw it away. Give your love. Live your life each and every day. Keep your hands wide open. Let the sun shine through. 'Cause you can never lose a thing if it belongs to you.
Thank you so much for that. That is a powerful way to end the conversation. You see, I believe that we are here on a mission in this world. And by that, it means that we come, when you are in a mission, usually you have a goal, you have an objective to conclude at the end of the day. So I believe that we should not return to where we came from with the luggage open. We need to open it. We need to empty it to the universal energy so that everybody can experience it. It is only when we have done that we can actually enjoy the saying, rest in peace, because you have done what you are supposed to do. So I believe that what we are doing is in line with the title of this episode, living our life at the service of other. And in Martin Luther King that said that, actually that is Muhammad Ali, who said that service to other is the rent we pay here on earth.
That's right.
That is so true.
That's so true.
Yeah. Some people think that, but I am not like her, I'm not like him. I cannot do. No. Don't think like that. There is a saying a guest here said to me that I was interviewing, that when the gods send a blind man to the battle, you are supposed to win as the blind men do. Which means that your blindness is already accounted for in your mission. It's part of it.
Yes.
Don't say you have only one eye. That is already part of the equation.
Yes.
So do what you are supposed to do. Don't return to where you came from with your luggage still closed. Let it open. Your hand you've done it all. So thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation. It has really been lovely.
Pleasure. And one last quote from Dr. Seuss, who is quite a controversial a person right now because of some things that he wrote back in the 50s and the 60s. But he has an expression that says, be yourself because everyone else is taken.
So true, so true, so true. So true, so true. Thank you so much for that. This has really been very lovely. I want to thank you so much.
This was delightful. I thank you so much for having me. And it was a pleasure speaking with you, Obehi. I love speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lovell.